Which of these two cameras has a larger sensor, a longer zoom range, and a brighter aperture? If you guessed this one, you're correct. It's the Canon G1X Mark II. Hey everyone, this is Dennis. Thanks for joining me again. I know it's been a while. Today we're going to talk about a camera that really surprised me. It's the large sensor point and shoot, the Canon G1X Mark II. It has a sensor that's close to micro four thirds size and a non-interchangeable zoom lens. The body is pretty small, but it's surprisingly dense. It's a great travel and vacation camera. It has the simplicity of a point and shoot with no need to think about different lenses, but it still offers image quality similar to what you'd get with a mirrorless camera. I've taken it with me on a couple of recent trips to Calgary and to Mexico, and it's been a joy to use. Canon's enthusiast point-and-shoot G-Series has been around for a very long time, and I've used a few of them myself over the years, starting with the G6, which was my main camera back in the mid-2000s, and then I also owned a Canon G10, I think, a few years later. The original G-Series cameras used 1 1/8 inch sensors, and the more modern ones use 1 inch sensors. But the G1X series uses much larger sensors again. In this case, it's 1.5 inches, which is essentially micro four thirds size. And they have always tried to offer professional features in a compact body and cater towards enthusiasts and travel photographers. Okay, let's talk about the specs of the camera. The G1X Mark II is a large sensor compact camera with zoom lens. It's 13 megapixels, so it's pretty low resolution, but it's a fairly large 1.5 inch sensor, which is just a tiny bit larger than micro four thirds. Like some of the similar Panasonic cameras, it's a multi-aspect sensor, which allows you to shoot at different aspect ratios without sacrificing resolution. It has a versatile 5x zoom range that goes from 24 millimeters on the wide to 120 millimeters on the long, and it's a pretty bright aperture of f2 at the wide end to f3.9 at the long end, and the lens has image stabilization. It also has a flip-up screen, and while there is no viewfinder built into the camera, you can add an external EVF via the hot shoe. The camera weighs about 550 grams, which is quite heavy for a camera that doesn't have interchangeable lenses. It was released in 2014, which means it's already 10 years old. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the body. The camera doesn't look too big. It's similar in size to my Olympus EP7 body, but it feels like a brick. It's surprisingly dense for its compact size, and it's very solidly built. It has a non-interchangeable lens that zooms. On the top is the shutter button, zoom rocker, and the mode dial. While it lacks control dials on the top, there are instead 2 control wheels on the lens, and these are highly customizable, so you can set them up to do different things. For example, you can have one be focus and one can be zoom or focal length adjustment, or you could set that to be aperture or exposure compensation. It's actually so configurable that it can be a little bit confusing when you change modes. It has a standard hot shoe and a pop-up flash. Since the camera uses a leaf shutter, you can sync flash at almost any speed. Unlike most of the Canon G-Series, the G1X screen flips upward for selfies and not out to the side. The screen is decent resolution. It's 1 million dots, so it's comparable to a lot of other cameras out there. And the batteries are a little small, so carry a spare. It also doesn't support USB charging, but at least the charger is fairly compact. One of the things that stands out most about this camera is its 5x zoom lens. It's one of the most unique features about it. It's 24mm on the wide end, all the way to 120mm on the long end. Compared to something like a mirrorless kit lens, the zoom range here is quite a bit larger. A typical kit lens might be 3x and go from around 24 to 70, maybe, and would usually be around f3.5 to f5.6. But this lens is almost twice as long as that. So instead of 70 on the long end, you're getting 120, which is much better for portraits and light telephoto use cases. It's also a much brighter lens. So instead of being f3.5 to f5.6, on the wide end, it's f2, and on the long end, f3.9. So that's very good. It's actually comparable in spec to the very well-respected Panasonic Leica 12-60 for micro four thirds. You can see here that the actual focal length of the Canon is 12.5 to 62.5, so basically the same as the Panasonic Leica lens, but the G1X is actually almost a stop faster on the wide end. Plus it's tiny. All of that makes for an extremely versatile lens that's useful in all kinds of situations. It can be bright when you need a little more in low light. It can be wide, it can be telephoto, it can be good for portraits. An extremely, extremely versatile lens. If you're only going to have one lens, this covers you for a huge percentage of all the photography use cases that you would ever need. So how is the performance and operation of the G1X Mark II? In a word, it's fine. It's supposed to be noticeably faster than the Mark I, and it's probably pretty good for a camera from 2014. The autofocus is contrast-based, but it seems accurate enough and responsive in my experience. I haven't had any serious issues with it. I also find the power zoom is much faster than many other cameras I've used. And depending on the setting, you can have the camera wake up or power on to a specific focal length, which is nice. And then there are quite a few customizable functions, and there's also a C1 and C2 mode on the mode dial where you can store settings. The leaf shutter is audible, but fairly quiet. And the autofocus illuminator is quite bright and noticeable. Can be a little distracting. You can also connect and remotely trigger the camera via Wi-Fi, but for some reason in that mode it only seems to shoot JPEGs and not RAWs. Something else worth mentioning, the camera's got an ND filter. I have it assigned to this button here, which is very useful. So how's the image quality on the G1X Mark II? It's mostly good, but there are a few things to talk about. The first is that the JPEG quality from this camera is trash. If you're only going to shoot JPEG, you're throwing away a lot of the potential of the camera. I don't know why it is, especially with this camera, if it's just the age of the camera or Canon's JPEGs are particularly bad, or there's a lot of compression and I don't know how to change it, but I found it was really bad on this camera compared to what I'm used to, so I only shoot RAW. The other big caveat around image quality is the limited dynamic range of the sensor, or particularly the ease at which you can clip highlights. It is not a deal breaker for me, but it's something you need to understand and know how to work around. And that means paying attention to your histogram and making sure that your exposure is not overexposed or clipping. And you may have to be okay knowing you will lose a few photos due to the blown highlights, but you make up for it with the versatile zoom range of the lens. Resolution-wise, it's only 13 megapixels, but that actually wasn't a problem for me. Compared to my 20 megapixel micro four thirds cameras, I don't see a huge perceivable difference in resolution. I think it's still sufficient for most non-professional use cases today. It's still more resolution than an A7S III, for example, and generally not a problem. How is the video quality on the G1X Mark II? It's there, but it's nothing to write home about. It's 1080p 30, but the quality of the 1080p is not great. Video quality is the one area you give up the most in on an older camera. Even for the day, video quality was not comparable to the GH4 or even the Sony a6000. If you need to make a video, it will do okay, but it's not good enough to use for anything serious. There are a few notable accessories worth mentioning for the G1X Mark II. First, the camera doesn't have a built-in EVF, but it does support an external EVF via the hot shoe. It takes the same ones as the EOS-M cameras, and there are two different models available. I haven't tried either one, so I can't offer an opinion on them. There was also a larger grip that was available, but as far as I can tell now, it doesn't seem to be purchasable online anywhere, and I haven't succeeded in getting one myself. I got used to the standard grip, and I find it works fine. One more thing that's worth pointing out is that the camera works with all standard Canon compatible flashes, and because of the leaf shutter, this can be quite a good camera to use with flash. And also, there is no filter thread on the lens by default, but you can purchase an adapter that will adapt the filter onto the lens, and it works fine. Okay, how does the G1X compare against other cameras? I'd say in general, compared to most mirrorless camera systems, it's more versatile than shooting with a kit lens, but it's lower quality than a more professional set of zooms or primes. On the other hand, the G1X fits easily in a bag or jacket pocket. Compared to a 1-inch sensor camera, the image quality is better on the G1X straight up, but it's a heavier camera. Finally, how does it compare to other cameras in its class, large sensor point-and-shoots? If you narrow it down to ones with a zoom, there are very, very few. The Panasonic LX100 is the first one that comes to mind. It's a little lighter. It has a brighter aperture, but it has less zoom range. It also doesn't have a flip screen. And then there's the LX100 Mark II, which has more resolution, but it has the same lens and body as the first one. I have used the original LX100, but I think I prefer the lens versatility of the G1X Mark II. There's also Leica, who once made a large sensor point and shoot, the X Vario, but I've never seen one in real life. And then there are Canon's own G1X Mark I and G1X Mark III. Both those cameras have less zoom range than the Mark II, although the Mark III steps up to a larger APS-C size sensor. I do hope to review that in a future video. The appeal of this camera is that it takes a bright 5x zoom lens and crams it into a compact camera body. And this makes it a perfect camera for travel when you want simplicity and convenience over absolute quality. It is old and it has a few issues, but I found the G1X Mark II a surprisingly useful camera even in 2024, and I would love to see Canon release a modern successor to this. I got mine used on Facebook Marketplace in excellent condition for 400 Canadian dollars. For that price, I think it is a great value. Okay, thanks for watching to the end, everybody. Those were my thoughts on the G1X Mark II. This video's taken a long time to come out for some reason, but I would love for you to leave your thoughts in the comments and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day. Bye.